All right, everybody. Happy July 18th. Happy Thursday. Hope you are well wherever you may be dialing in from today. My name is Albert, founder of Albert's List, and I'll be your host today. And today we're talking about how to network to your next career opportunity with Andrea Velasquez, fondly known as the Millennial Career Coach. Networking is more important than ever today in this job market where the margin for error is tight and sending your job application into an applicant tracking system is no longer effective. Today, we're going to talk about how you can become a better networker so you can get that coveted job opportunity and what you can do to get there, whether it's through live networking events, things online such as this, or everything in between. We're also going to show you how you can do this for yourself through a boot camp that we're going to launch that starts next week. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Andrea and also let you know that this is being recorded and will be made available to you once we upload it to our YouTube channel. Andrea, welcome back.
Awesome. Thank you for having me back, Albert. It's always a pleasure to be with you guys. Good evening, everybody, wherever you are dialing in from. This is what we're going to cover today. So I'll start off, obviously, like just introducing who I am, emphasizing why we need to network in the first place, setting aside some ground rules and letting you know expectations you should set for yourself as you begin or continue your networking journey. Show you that I'm not just talking the talk, but I walk the walk with how I establish myself and how you can do it too. And then, of course, last but not least, the real meat of the presentation that I'm sure you guys signed up for is how to actually network. And as Albert mentioned, we do have our own little boot camp coming up, but I do have I would love for you guys to stick around till the very end. Whatever questions you would have, feel free to pop them in the chat. I'll do my best to answer them as we go along. But if there's any questions that we aren't able to address in the presentation, feel free to keep them going in the chat and I will do my best to answer them at the tail end of the presentation. Now, without further ado, let me introduce myself to you. So, yeah, have to emphasize the name. I took my husband's name when I got married. So, but professionally, I still go by my maiden name, Andrea Misir, as Albert posted in my LinkedIn. And as you can see in my Zoom background right here, um, still go by Andrea Misir. I I've been a marketer for a little over 13 years. At the beginning of my career, I was in ad tech and media. So worked at a couple of startups and worked on campaigns for Sprint, Johnson & Johnson, the baby cream brand, not the vaccine, obviously. P&G and Showtime, to name a few. And I also have 5 years of experience at a couple of some of the largest privately held healthcare companies based in the Bronx, including during the pandemic. So that was definitely an experience. I was quoted in articles that were published on Entrepreneur, NerdWallet, and Fast Company. And a couple fast facts about me as a coach. I've gotten as of last year, actually, a over $500,000 total salary increase for the clients I've worked with. I've logged in easily over 1,000 coaching hours, and I have helped a little over 1,000 clients and mentees over the years. And some of the companies that have hired my clients include Etsy, Capgemini, Etsy, Moody's, FishServe, and Cisco. And when I'm not doing career coaching stuff, when I'm not working, you can catch me reading. This is one book that I always recommend to people, especially if you're still trying to figure out what kind of job makes the most sense for you to pursue next in your career journey. Ikigai, I highly recommend this book. It's a Japanese concept that is basically having the intersection of what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. So great book to just get a better understanding of what comes next. I also try to go to the gym a couple times a week. I organize monthly meetups. I've been an avid Redditor. I also spend way more time on Reddit than I probably should. But those meetups are actually from the Stanford subreddit, which I had moved to about a year and a half. And I just decided to organize some monthly meetups. And every month we get about at least 20 people attending. And I've also logged in about over 300 hours or so on Final Fantasy 14. That is my avatar. That's my name. I am happy to friend anyone and we can do a dungeon together. Now, I didn't just put this on here just for the sake of presentation or the sake of, keeping things light. There's a point, and that is that authenticity matters. I'm definitely going to be touching upon this throughout the course of the presentation, but it is so, so important that you keep this concept in mind as you are going through your networking journey, when you're making connections, when you're talking to people. It is so, so important to be true to yourself and to keep that personality about you, especially with just how much crap is going on in the job market. It can be really easy to kind of get jaded, but eventually, sooner or later, people will need to know the real you so that you can have a strong enough relationship so that they can position you accordingly for any referral that could come up. So please keep that in mind moving forward. Just be true to yourself and don't be afraid to show that off. A little philosophical there. Now, moving on to our agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about why you should network in the first place. Almost obligatory infographic with any presentation. About 61% of professionals said that networking leads to job opportunities. 73% said that they have hired people based solely off of connections. And 61% have also found jobs through weak tie relationships, which I will get into in a later point of this presentation. So numbers do show that networking is greatly important. And of course, I'd be remiss to not mention the fact that I wouldn't be here speaking to you right now, thanks to just being a part of Albert's community, if not for how we've been able to be proof of networking done right. We had, and I tried my best to go back into Facebook to see when we connected, but it was years ago from just networking, talking about the state of career coaching right now and just the lack of resources, for him attending my wedding with his lovely girlfriend last year. But we've had a year-long friendship, and this would not have happened if we did not just take the time to network and eventually grow into a friendship. So, and with that being said, let's talk a little bit about some of the ground rules / expectations that come when building a network. So in addition to what I said earlier about making sure that you are as authentic as possible throughout the experience, it will save your sanity. You also want to keep that in mind when finding people to connect with. 100 close connections are always going to be way more important than just random connecting with strangers, especially if you're on LinkedIn, because I find that LinkedIn, a lot of people almost see it as if you're collecting Pokemon. You got to connect with them all. You don't have to. Quality and quantity matters a lot. You need to find that middle ground between, having ride or die people in your corner to expanding a little bit more. And you also need to be politely persistent. Most people do want to help, but that bandwidth is very limited. And you need to be very consistent with your follow-up, which can get into a little bit more later in the presentation. And you must never, ever take rejection personally or silence personally. People do have a lot going on. For every 10 people that you connect with, I guarantee you that most of them want to help you. Let's say like roughly 8 out of 10 people will want to help you. They're not going to get back to you right away. 1 or 2 people could be complete jerks about it, but if they are, you can't let them get to you because it's just not going to be a good use of your time or energy. And I also must stress that I'm sure you're coming into this right now and you must have exhausted so many options in your job search to try and find something. But I have to stress that it's not you, it is the job market, which is why we're also doing what we can to network, because application hell is just that. This is arguably the worst job market since the Great Recession. This year alone, like in the first half of this year, over 100,000 employees got laid off at tech companies. And that's just tech. That's not even including all the other industries, but that's the ones that layoffs that FYI can track. And of course, hiring has been on a steady decline, as we could see from the BLS labor statistics. So I have to stress this because don't ever feel as if you are doing something wrong or you're unhireable or, you're like a leper. It's not, it is the market, and we're going to do what we can to help beat that market. Now, let's talk a little bit more about like the meaty stuff, how I was able to establish myself and what you could kind of learn from me as an example, as well as what are some other tips that you can implement. So let me give you a little bit more of my timeline as a marketer. I graduated toward the tail end of the Great Recession with my bachelor's degree in 2011 to 2015. That's when I worked in ad tech and media, and I freelanced. So I basically just hustled my butt off right after I graduated college. Went through 3 layoffs in 3 years, and I had about like 3 to 6 months in between those jobs, and I just was so aggressive with my search. When I wasn't applying to jobs, I was sending out connection requests to recruiters. I was trying to hit up former colleagues and clients and just see if they had anything going on or if there was any leads in the industry. That's how I was able to get interviews at the time, until I had a quarter life crisis, which I feel is almost par for the course for anybody, especially not even like in mid-20s. Like I think anybody could technically go through something like this where you're like, what am I going to do? What makes the most sense? And this was especially the case when my job search lasted for about a good year. This was also around the time when my mom just retired, my sister was getting married, and funds were tight. I'm like, oh, okay. So not only was I questioning the industry that I was in, I was also in super dire circumstances, and I literally couldn't afford to just kind of figure this out when I had to make sure that the bills were getting paid when I was with my mom. Took me about another year. The good news is at that time, I wasn't completely strapped. I was still getting unemployment. I was still getting some freelance income, but there was definitely more money going out than coming in. But I was able to land my first healthcare marketing job. And from 2016 to 2021, that was definitely the turning point in my career to really not just give me a confidence boost, but also get more meat and more experience under my belt as a marketer, which of course led to 2022 and 2023 being the highest earning period in my professional career with just everything that I had going on. But then now from 2023 onward, I've decided to take another chapter, focus a little bit more on career coaching and kind of doing my own thing. So a couple of things that I wanted to illustrate with showing my timeline here. One, this is also just like general career coaching, like more broader advice. Focus on your career instead of one straight line. Look at it as chapters. No job right now is going to operate. You can't expect to be at a job until you're set to retire, because it's just that layer of job security doesn't really exist anymore, especially with a lot of these bigger companies that are just cutting left and right without giving any notice. It's not going to be the most realistic, but that doesn't mean that it's going to define who you are. Your story would still keep going, but instead of having long plans about here's what I want to do, I want to be in the C-suite by the time I reach 60. But don't plan that far out ahead. Let's have like shorter sprints instead. And the second part is that I was able to use those moments to really help fine tune my story, because everybody's going to go through high and lows. I was still able to focus on my wins. And this is going to be, again, back to what I was saying earlier with authenticity. It really helped define how I wanted to approach my networking, because I wasn't just going to be sending out like a canned message. Needed to let my personality shine, which I was afraid of, because I'm sure at some point some of you guys are just like, well, how much am I actually saying? Definitely want to make sure that you're not a robot, you are a real person. People do want to work with other humans, so don't be afraid to just be yourself and find those moments to combine funness with professionalism. Show that you are a real person, that you can have a fun side, but you can also get the job done. And the results of me, here's some of the results of me being able to just be who I am. I got contacted by a reporter at Bloomberg of April this year. I was into their Midtown office in New York for a video piece that should be coming out this week. I was also able to land a couple of freelance clients, including one that I had for a really long time. One of the first social media clients I've ever worked with was a boutique jewelry store owner. So I was able to get some really cute free pieces. And also when I got married, she was able to give me a really awesome discount on my bridesmaids jewelry. That's cool. And then of course, staying in touch with previous connects, keeping those relationships going. I was able to follow up with an old recruiter who I had a fantastic rapport with and just say, hey, I saw that you guys had an opening. Anything going on? And then the rest was history there. Now, forgive my typo. Let's talk about how you can establish yourself if you haven't already. Here's a little bit more of some inspiration. Think about some of the people that you follow. We got Chris Rock, who's my favorite comedian of all time, PewDiePie, one of the biggest YouTubers on the planet, and Jaden, who's still pretty big, but not as big as these two. They're consistent with who they are. They have a pretty clear brand. Job search is marketing yourself. So making sure that you are consistent in who you are, both visually and with how you write, is going to be really important when networking, because even if you're talking to somebody right in that moment, they might not get it, but as time goes on, then they'll see that, oh, okay, this is Andrea, she's the marketer and she also does career coaching stuff. Well, let me keep her in mind if the opportunity strikes. Well, of course, you might be asking yourself, Andrea, I don't want to be an influencer. I'm not one right now. I have no desire to be one. That is totally fine. You don't have to be one. You can establish yourself without posting content all the time or making an animated character or just yelling at your computer. You just need to strike a balance with showing up and creating those assets around you. Ultimately, if you would look at your networking journey as a cake, the expertise is going to be the real cake of the cake. The personality is going to be the frosting. And any little fun things that you could put out there in terms of posts, in terms of content, in terms of comments, those are just sprinkles. Definitely not needed, but an added bonus for an already yummy cake. Here's an example of real people that I've worked with. They're not influencers. They had no desire to be, but they wanted to do what they can to stand out, make strong impressions and strong relationships. And they were able to not just show up professionally, but embrace a little bit of who they are and put that out there. They were able to get sizable networks. They've had personality showcased in graphics, in text, with the content that they're showing. And that also is a good combination of the expertise that they're showcasing as well. So let me break down the specific components you need to establish yourself. Bragging about your big wins. Everybody has them. I'm going to talk a little bit more about just giving you a little bit more detail on what exactly you can do to better emphasize a big win. Any awards, honors, distinctions, absolutely have every right to show that off. You worked hard for them. Any case studies that you could put together of your work, and I'll also provide an example of a case study. And then, of course, showing consistency in what you do. Recommendations, which is especially crucial on LinkedIn, and it's a really strong component of having an all-star profile, which I have definitely talked about before in other presentations. Having an awesome cheer squad that can vouch for you. Having quantifiable results, which could kind of tie into big wins. But if it's not like a big juicy thing, then a result is still a result. And then of course your personality, as I mentioned. And here's some examples of big wins. At the end of the day, what they all have in common is that it's some kind of number. People resonate with numbers and it shows credibility and expertise a lot quicker than just words. So being able to incorporate numbers, and this isn't even just networking. This could also be like for your resume and interviewing, FYI. But this will definitely help establish your expertise. So people you've managed, revenue you brought in, percentages in terms of time saved, improvement, etc. These are all results that people ultimately hire for and would want to be able to see in some way how you can demonstrate, which would make a case for you to get into a job better. And here's an example of a case study that I put together, publicly available. I'm happy to have this. This is actually on my personal website. Happy to share this Canva thing with anybody too. But basically, a case study has three components: the background, the actions taken, and the results. So this specific one was when I had a short-term project with Avalara. They're an $8 billion global tax solution. One of the products that I was working on was a $2 million annual recurring revenue product. And the campaign that I worked on was promoting an on-demand webinar. And I was responsible for the email campaign and the display campaign. Every month on average, we had about 200 registrants, 10% of them converted. So that was about $20,000 in monthly recurring revenue. So all good stuff that people would want to see in a case study, especially for the marketers out there and for project managers as well. Cool. Now, last but certainly not least, we've covered all this stuff. How can we get you to networking? If you recall what I had highlighted before in this slide, cheer squad, I would definitely start out with your cheer squad. And that would more often than not come from your first degree connections, the immediate circle, the people that know you best, love you the most, friends, family, colleagues, classmates, neighbors. These are the people that could absolutely would want to see you succeed. I would catch up with them, set up calls, don't be afraid to ask for help, and it needs to be a call. You can't just network with just text. I know that's an easy trap that millennials and Gen Z fall into sometimes. I'm saying we have to break that stereotype, especially when it comes to this. And by expanding from just our first degree network, we are creating the second, third degree. I know it's like LinkedIn terminology, but basically this person that knows my mom, knows my best friend, knows my colleague. That's the difference between weak ties versus strong connections. The secret is making those weak tie connections that your stronger connections will introduce you to. So what I challenge you guys to do now, you have a little bit of homework, but this is definitely something that you can keep in mind if you haven't already. Make a list of your connections. You could actually, if you want to start with LinkedIn, you can. If you want to go into your contact books, you could just export that and categorize them based on strength. Go through your strongest connections and see who they know. For instance, I have a friend who's the HR director at Columbia Business School. She had personally, when I had been in between jobs earlier in my career, she actually introduced me to 2 opportunities. Sadly, they didn't go anywhere because, fun fact about higher education and sometimes some medical centers, the money's not that great. But she is definitely a connection that I consider to be strong and would be somebody that I could totally ask for help and be like, hey, you know anybody in Columbia that I could work with? And then we could look that way. And I could also take it a step further and see, oh, I see you have a connection with the head of marketing at the executive MBA program. Would love to have a conversation with them. I actually have an idea for a campaign. So you want to be as specific as possible with that. But I know it's just so easy to kind of fall into a LinkedIn trap. There are so many other ways to build out your network, both online and offline. For LinkedIn, I will say I cannot stress enough that it is important to prioritize personal connections, then following pages, because when you follow pages, you'll get some additional insight in terms of who some of the decision makers are, especially if you pay for LinkedIn. And then last but not least, groups. Groups were an afterthought when LinkedIn was creating itself. They're not managed very well, unfortunately. Eventbrite, of course, Albert is very good with posting his events on Eventbrite. They're a great way to connect with people either online or offline. Same thing with Meetup. Your college alumni network is also a great place to start because at least you can have the college experience be that icebreaker when you connect with somebody and say, hey, I'm a CUNY grad too. CUNY is the City University of New York. How about the CUNY system? I'm just kidding. Slack is also a fantastic app for you to find different communities. I personally am a member of quite a few different marketing groups, but there's others, like depending on the industry, of course. I'm going to be biased, and I know quite a few sales and marketing groups off the top of my head, but I did write out a couples. Tech has the Tech Workers Club, fantastic community. I also provide some resources there. Product School for any product folks. If you're in sales, biz dev, Rev Genius is a fantastic, fantastic community. I actually got a chance to talk to the owner. He's a wonderful human being. Marketing, especially if there's any other people of color that are in the marketing and advertising space. Hugh's a great group of people. Discord is also like has some potential. I personally think Slack is a little bit better, but I can't not talk about Discord, especially since there are more and more communities popping up for career support. And depending on your industry, Career Flow is one of the bigger, more active ones that I know of off the top of my head. And then, of course, Facebook group. Like Albert's List will always be a safe, welcoming space for you to network and to just share your experience, see if you can get more knowledge and get access to opportunities. If there are any local groups, major cities, there's usually job groups around that. I personally, that's actually how Albert and I were initially connected, because I was a moderator of the Jobs in NYC Facebook group that had over 150,000 job seekers. And that's just New York City. But in addition to job groups, there could also be professional groups that you could join in Facebook. I'm also a member of quite a few women in marketing groups, women in email, things like that. So definitely search around. Obviously, like with every group, you're gonna find some spammies, some spam bots, but there's also gonna be some great opportunities to connect with real people and see what you can learn from them. And then last but certainly not least, professional associations and any other affiliated nonprofits, almost all of them, because they survive off of membership revenue. That's usually their number one source of revenue. I don't recommend you to sign up for them quite yet, but they will almost always have some kind of event, whether it's online or offline, that you could participate in, or even volunteer if they need some additional help. It's a great way to connect. When I was in between jobs myself, I volunteered at this conference called WomanCon, and it was the first of its kind. I actually connected directly with the conference organizers, and I got to meet some pretty cool people. So, and then you might be asking yourself, what about stranger danger? What what can you talk about with a complete stranger? As I was mentioning before, with the example of a college alumni network, you could use that as an icebreaker. It's definitely going to be like a neutral option. You usually can't go wrong with that, but you can make a stronger connection with a more unique commonality. So for example, if you trauma bond over a crappy job, this dude, Lee, I didn't reach out to him at all. He sent me a connection request and I accepted it because I knew I recognized his name. I joined, we both worked at the same company, but at different times. He left shortly after I joined. And this was the first message he sent me. So I thought that was awesome of him to send him that to me. Um, as I mentioned before, if you don't have anything else to go off of, you can use like a little bit more of a trite icebreaker, nothing too candid generic, like, oh, we have mutual connections. I want to connect with like-minded people, because it could be seen as spammy. Find something a little bit more unique, like what they talk about, for instance. Lola Bakari, I was following for quite some time, and she had posted something about um, being a woman of color in marketing. And I really resonated with that. So I was being very authentic and genuine when she sent me a connection request. So I'm like, ooh, I have a LinkedIn celebrity following me. That's awesome. So you want to make sure that you're kind of using more specific commonalities when reaching out for people. All right. You connected with somebody. Now what? To really make sure that you're solidifying these connections, you want to make sure that you are being of service in some way and seeing if they need help. One conversation is going to start and it's going to plant the seed. If they don't have anything at the moment, just follow up with them. It's one of the things that is going to that you have to do when it comes to networking is going to be the follow up. It's not very likely that you'd be able to get an opportunity right away in the first conversation, but if that didn't happen, ask them when's a good time to follow up. So we touch base. Paul, I was connected with him for a really long time, but we never had a chance to meet, and we were trying to meet with him. And I was trying to set up time to meet. And I finally did. And then I was telling him, like, oh, yeah, I've been looking for something. Would love if you could keep me in mind. And literally, we got a chance to talk in April. In May, he said, oh, are you still looking for something? Like, yeah, sure. Why not? Send me more info. And I was able to get an interview that way. And then, of course, in terms of actually getting some additional work, you do want to be able to provide some value. And what do you even say in addition to that? The very first message should be on the shorter side. And if they don't respond right away, as I had mentioned earlier, people are busy, so they might not be able to respond as soon as possible. Follow up in about 5 to 7 days. And the follow up can be a little bit more detailed if you haven't been able to, because you don't want to be able to have the first message be a wall of text. Keep it short and sweet. Have some good rapport, talk to them a little bit, see if you could set up some time to chat, learn a little bit more about what they're working on so that you can chime in with a little bit more of your expertise. And then you can say, oh, yeah, by the way, I'm looking for this. I'm looking to get marketing manager jobs. Would you happen to know of any openings on the team or anybody that you could refer me to that's hiring? Excuse me. Wanted to include this screenshot because I initially connected with her when I wanted to expand my network and get in touch with fellow college alumni, only for her to reach out to me almost a year later asking for career help. And for my experience working with the former employer, we had stories to tell. So I would consider that a pretty strong connection. And Dana was somebody that had a wealth of advice for me. And there would also an opportunity for me to contribute to her team because her organization needed some additional support. Oh, Bennett asked the question. Not possible to maintain a connection with 500. It's not possible to maintain a relationship with 500 plus connections. And if so, everybody is aware of this. And if so, how to make contact at least 2 times a year? Is it by making a general post like Happy New Year? Please advise on how to maintain a large network. Very, very good question and very good point. So yes, you're 100% correct. I don't think any human being can maintain a consistent relationship with over 500 connections. The reason why I emphasize the importance of having a larger network is to play a little bit more of the LinkedIn game. LinkedIn will actually show a little bit more weight to your profile, and you'd be more likely to show up in searches from recruiters if you do have a bigger network. Um, but also, again, you don't want to have that doesn't mean that you should go even above and beyond and have 10,000 connections, especially if it's just not going to be organic or make a lot of sense for you. The Pareto principle would come into play here, the 80-20 rule. 80% of your time and 80% of any opportunities that would come up would be from 20% of your connections, and vice versa. So I would say to answer that question, you could absolutely kind of have a little bit more, like definitely spend some time to just catch up with some folks that you want to catch up with, and just see, like, kind of take a gauge. Some unconventional advice that I do recommend that doesn't really get talked about a lot from anybody that talks about LinkedIn in general. If you find yourself connected to a bunch of people, but then you're questioning how you know them and whether or not you talk to them or whether or not you could provide value to them, if they could provide value to you, it's totally fine for you to disconnect to them. You could potentially send them a reconnection request down the line. I doubt it, but if you find that they are total strangers and there's no mutual value to be had, you could disconnect and then find another person that you can connect with. So hope that answered your question. Talked a little bit about what to say. I have to emphasize what you cannot say. So as I mentioned before, you want things to be short and sweet. You don't want to have a long message, especially if that's one of the first things that you're saying. And you don't want to be self-serving and one-sided. The first screenshot here, I will say I applaud this person for being really specific and having a very specific ask, which is fantastic. But at the same time, I never spoke to this person. I have no idea who he was. I wasn't sure what his qualifications were. He did send me his resume, but that was not enough to inform who he was as a person. And the connection that he's referring to, I had not spoken to in a decade. So didn't know enough about him to make a referral. Have not spoken to the mutual request to know enough about what she's looking for and if this would be a good fit. And it just seemed a little bit presumptuous. And then, of course, the second message is a cold DM from a salesperson. So was not going to work anyway. Right. So I'm going to wrap up by having some final reminders in place. Consistency and persistence will pay off. So as you keep making connections and as you keep having these conversations, it's going to take time. It's not going to happen right away, but it will. So keep talking to folks, keep being of service. And if you're just having a time, if you're just having a day where you're like, I don't want to connect with anybody, I don't feel social at all, it's okay to take a step back, watch Netflix, and then it's going to be a new day tomorrow for you to try and make some additional connections and make some schedule some more meetings. Now, hopefully this does bring us to the end of the presentation. If you find yourself needing a little bit more help, we have a couple of offers for you. As Albert mentioned earlier, we have a boot camp coming up. It starts next week. I will personally help you with establishing your professional self. If you need help better positioning yourself on LinkedIn, finding the exact people that you can connect with. I will actually go into my LinkedIn as well. I have Sales Navigator. Not everybody is going to. I don't recommend everybody having Sales Navigator. And that would be an extra step where I can actually get some lists of people for you, help craft specific messages and think about things that you can say to them. And I did mention, we did have a couple of things that we mentioned during the presentation with some resources and other sites you could use. We'll also provide access to a much more exhaustive, comprehensive list. We only have a few early bird seats left. And since you're part of the webinar, you can actually get a $25 off. So that's like about 10% off if you sign up now. And then, of course, if you need even more help with your search, you see I had this QR code here the whole time. I'm sorry, this QR code. I am launching my own program. If you want more career coaching search help outside of networking, I go over job search planning. I'll help revamp your resume. I will go through interview prep and just help give you an overall confidence boost. I'm still working on launching the program. I can only take on 15 people at a time. And you can sign up. Well, you'll sign up for my newsletter, but I'll also send you a little bit more information by tomorrow about the program. So stay tuned for that. And with that, we are all done, and I'm happy to open the floor to any other questions, comments.
Let's talk a little bit about the boot camp. What are you going to be teaching week to week?
Okay. So first week, we will talk a little bit more about positioning, making sure that whatever help you need to help boost your online profile, you have all the components there. We'll also talk more about really identifying like the levels of people in your network, and also helping you find the right people as well. The boot camp, and I do have to emphasize that we are going to have a close group of people in the boot camp. Spots are going to be limited because I want to make sure that it's not just going to be a bunch of slides. I'm going to be holding you to account, and I want to be able to help you as much as possible. So in addition to me showing you and kind of teaching you, I'm also going to be holding your hand, and we can work together so that you get closer to not just positioning yourself, but creating that strong network and knowing exactly what you're going to say to people, as well as having even more resources at your disposal.
Excellent. Any other questions about networking today here that we might have? All right. Well, if there's no other, oh, do you by any chance know of any good groups or resources for people who will heavily struggle with reaching out?
Can you elaborate a little bit further on that question, please, Ankur? It's like what the struggle with reaching out, where did that struggle come from exactly? Go with people, but extreme anxiety. Okay. Let's see how we can best answer this when we have 13 minutes left as part of our time. So must preface that I am not a mental health professional. When I see the words extreme anxiety, my very first thought is, make sure that you are taking care of yourself and you're getting the help that you need to address that anxiety. Because not just even for networking purposes, but also for your own well-being. We want you to be as healthy as possible. And last thing we want to do is put you in a position where that anxiety could be crippling. With some of the clients and the mentees that I've worked with that have anxiety when it comes to a professional setting, analysts said if you put somebody on a pedestal, you are giving them permission to look down on you. Oh dear. We always have to find methods to cope Ankur any crippling anxiety. We got to find a way to push through, right?
Ankur,
Oh
so
dear.
I will put it this way. I'm neurodivergent. And I'll go ahead and admit this over however many people will overwatch this. I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome at age 6. And, I had a therapist who told my mother that I would be no better than bagging groceries for the rest of my life. And so one thing that's helped me a lot when it comes to networking, because I'm also a very introverted person, is to look at networking like that of a system. You're going into a conversation, you're looking for very specific information. Hopefully, you can connect along the way, and you can be very polite towards that whole entire thing too. And the closer that you have to a goal, the closer that you will to getting to the very end of that. I know that the thing that freaks people out about networking a lot is that it's a very unstructured like situation. You have a room full of people that you've never met, that you don't know, and that, yeah, it absolutely is scary. And so if you break it down into just, one person at a time, one conversation at a time, one question at a time, it's good. And what's even better is when you are focused on the audience in mind, because neurodivergent people have ADD issues. But if you have, if you really focus down on what it is that you want to do, and you know what it is, the kind of work that you're looking for and the kind of networking that you're seeking, then that makes it even better. Nothing is worse for a neurodivergent person than going to an event that they don't want to be at, that is disorganized, that has people from every single walk of life, that is trying to sell you everything from life insurance uh to fitness shakes. If you're a software developer, if you are a data scientist, you need to go to software developer, data scientist events. Focus specifically on your coding stack, focus specifically on your software stack, and you should not settle for anything less than that. And so and that will help you feel calmer. It will help you feel better because everybody at those events knows the language you speak, because you're going to be just as technical as they are. They know that they're all there for similar reasons, to learn more, to share insights, to geek out on whatever it is, and you're going to walk out feeling a lot more satisfied. The worst part of networking is going to a networking event and having all the energy sapped out of you because you're talking to energy vampires. And so we'll talk about that on the boot camp. I am happy to talk
Yeah.
about how I spent the first 5 years of my life wasting my time on networking. I was at Chamber of Commerce mixers. I was at networking events with people who did exactly that, sell everything from life insurance to fitness shakes. And I would walk out of those events feeling incredibly disappointed in myself. I'm like, what did I do that for? But it was all part of my journey
Yeah.
because it led me to here. So we will talk
Mhm.
about it at that in the boot camp, and I hope that that convinces you to come and learn more for sure.
I think I was on the opposite end of the spectrum when I was earlier in my career and just going to the networking events in the big city where I'm like, oh my God, free drinks, free food. And I was able to make some decent connections at the time, but from a long-term perspective, sadly, almost everybody that I met at those events and as part of those exchanges did not provide any meaningful impact in my career, which could
Hell,
be part of a larger
you and
discussion
I
that we could have as women.
you and I hail from very, very like hyped up cities, right? Like there's nothing more, I would say, exciting and jazzing than saying, I'm headed to San Francisco or I'm headed into New York tonight for a networking event. Cause, you've seen the TV shows where it's like, the big boss coming in, and hopefully you get a chance to talk to them and hand over your business card and all that kind of stuff. When reality, it's just, the big boss probably doesn't want to be there
Yeah.
either, but they're there because they, were either
Mhm.
forced into it or they're trying to look for something. And the
And
more
now it's just like
focused,
peak
yeah.
faking till you're making it too.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So
Yeah. I was a very different person in my 20s where I was just looking for any
hmm.
excuse to party and just have fun with people. And I was not a good drunk
Oh
either.
no. Oh
Those
no.
opposite
We're
experiences of
admitting things
networking
on
gone
recorded
wrong.
video. Oh no.
Authenticity matters.
Yeah,
And I
it
can't,
does. It does.
as you get older, you can't drink like that anymore. And
Yeah.
especially with networking. Just stick to 2 drinks max. Know your limits.
Yeah. So, and one of the other things about networking is, in order to be interesting to others, you must be interested. And in order to be interested, you should go to things that are interesting to you. And so if you are going to things that you're disinterested in and thinking because you need to be at this event because some job search god from way up above with 2 million followers told you that you need to go and network, that's not the right advice either. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Literally, like we were literally just talking about this, Albert, in terms of, you know, prominent voices out there. I think it's really important
Yeah.
for anybody that is going to take advice from
Hmm.
anybody else.
Yeah.
They needed to have walked a similar path. Otherwise, you'll have somebody like, okay, it could work for them. I had rich parents. I went to Ivy League school. And of course, I had all these opportunities come to me versus, you know, somebody that had a very different walk in life. Yeah. Easier
Yeah.
to talk when it's about something you're interested in or excited to talk about. Absolutely. So that's where, you know, having your personality also kind of being showcased, you could have networking conversations that might not even, not right away at least, be anything about professional stuff. I had a conversation with an awesome nerdy dude on lunch club, and 40 out of the 45 minutes we were just talking about wondering, how did we get matched on lunch club anyway? And like, okay, well, here's what we do from a professional setting. So, it's all about finding that intersection of fun and professionalism.
Yeah, Ankur. So you're going to find yourself at an event that you want to be at about a topic that you're interested in, and you're just never going to stop talking. Now, there's also another aspect to that where you should absolutely listen to what other people are saying. So,
Like,
let's figure that part out too. But,
feel
look.
like every minority auntie or mother always told us we have two ears and one mouth for a reason.
Mhm,
Listen twice as
mhm.
much as you talk.
Exactly, exactly. So, with that said, I'm going to, if there are any other questions, I want to invite you all to continue the conversation with our networking boot camp here that starts next week. I'm very excited to have some of you join us to continue your networking journey, and we're here to guide you along. I'm here to guide you along because I too was a networker once that had no idea what was going on, and you can become one who does. So, without further ado, Andrea, do you have any final thoughts before we conclude?
Yeah. Thank you so much to everybody who joined us this evening. We very much appreciate your time. I hope to connect with as much of you guys as possible, keep the networking going. I hope that you were able to get some valuable insights. I would love to hear about that. Should you send me a connection request on LinkedIn? We also welcome your feedback. I think, Albert, you're going to be sending a note to people asking for some feedback on presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And so,
Yeah,
we'll
love
do
to see
that.
what we could do
And
better, and we're here to help.
yeah. All right. Wonderful. Well, without further ado, have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Stay cool, and we will be in touch shortly. Thank you all, everybody, and goodbye.